You think you know what it takes to survive? Try waking up in a world where every day is a fight for your life. Where a single mistake means becoming dinner for a predator that's been hunting your kind for generations. Where the cold can freeze your bones in hours, and hunger drives you to do things you never imagined you'd be capable of. Prehistoric humans didn't just survive, they endured horrors that would break most of us in minutes. And the shocking truth? Some of those survival tactics are almost too disturbing to believe. Imagine opening your eyes to a sky the color of ash, the air sharp with cold, your breath hanging in front of your face like smoke. It's not winter, it's just another day on Earth 50,000 years ago. This is a planet that doesn't care if you survive. Ice Age winds sweep across open plains with nothing to block them. Blizzards arrive without warning. Summers are short, barely warm enough to thaw the frozen ground, and winters feel endless. If you're lucky, your group has made camp near a stand of trees for firewood, or by a river for water. If not, you're exposed, and exposure means death. Hypothermia can set in within hours, and once it does, you're not waking up again. Even when the climate isn't trying to kill you, the land itself is unpredictable. Flooding rivers can wipe away entire camps. Sudden droughts can turn hunting grounds into empty wastelands. Every step of your journey could bring a new hazard. A cliff you didn't see in the fog, a patch of unstable ice, a lightning storm that sends fire racing through dry grass. And then there are the sounds. The low rumble of something large moving through the trees. The high, distant scream of a predator you can't see. Out here you are never at the top of the food chain. Something is always bigger, faster, or hungrier than you. To survive, you need more than strength, you need constant awareness. A slip of focus can mean a twisted ankle, and a twisted ankle means you're falling behind. Falling behind means you're left behind. In this world, every breath you take is borrowed time. And nature is always ready to collect its debt. Imagine opening your eyes to a sky the color of ash, the air sharp with cold, your breath hanging in front of your face like smoke. It's not winter, it's just another day on Earth 50,000 years ago. This is a planet that doesn't care if you survive. Ice Age winds sweep across open plains with nothing to block them. Blizzards arrive without warning. Summers are short, barely warm enough to thaw the frozen ground, and winters feel endless. If you're lucky, your group has made camp near a stand of trees for firewood, or by a river for water. If not, you're exposed, and exposure means death. Hypothermia can set in within hours, and once it does, you're not waking up again. Even when the climate isn't trying to kill you, the land itself is unpredictable. Flooding rivers can wipe away entire camps. Sudden droughts can turn hunting grounds into empty wastelands. Every step of your journey could bring a new hazard. A cliff you didn't see in the fog, a patch of unstable ice, a lightning storm that sends fire racing through dry grass. And then there are the sounds. The low rumble of something large moving through the trees. The high, distant scream of a predator you can't see. Out here you are never at the top of the food chain. Something is always bigger, faster, or hungrier than you. To survive, you need more than strength, you need constant awareness. A slip of focus can mean a twisted ankle, and a twisted ankle means you're falling behind. Falling behind means you're left behind. In this world, every breath you take is borrowed time. And nature is always ready to collect its debt. You are never truly alone out here, not because of your tribe, but because something is always watching you. The Ice Age wasn't just a time of mammoths and woolly rhinos. It was also home to some of the most terrifying predators to ever walk the earth. Saber-toothed cats, with fangs as long as your hand, could bring down animals twice your size, and you're not much harder. Giant hyenas, taller than your waist, hunted in packs, their bone-crushing jaws able to snap your arm in a single bite. And lurking in caves were bears so massive that one swipe could break your spine. Predators didn't hunt with hesitation, they hunted with precision. If they smelled blood, they tracked it for miles. If they spotted you limping, they'd follow, waiting for you to slow just enough. You weren't competition, you were dinner. Even when you weren't being chased, you lived with the knowledge that an attack could come at any moment. That rustle in the grass? Could be the wind, or a crouching cat. The silence before sunset? Could be nothing, or everything. Your best defense wasn't strength, it was staying unseen. You walked where the wind was at your back so predators couldn't smell you. You avoided tall grass where ambushes were easy. You never traveled alone unless you were ready to risk your life. This wasn't a fair fight, it was survival in a predator's world. And you? You were just prey with a plan. Predators were terrifying. The cold could be deadly. But the thing that killed more prehistoric humans than anything else was hunger. The human body needs fuel, and in the Ice Age that fuel wasn't easy to find. There were no grocery stores, no fields of wheat, no guarantee of a next meal. If your hunt failed, you went hungry. If your foraging trip came up empty, your children went hungry. Sometimes that hunger sharpened your senses, made you more alert, more determined. But often it just weakened you. Hunger slows the mind, makes you careless, and in this world, carelessness gets you killed. Food was seasonal, unpredictable, and fiercely fought over. A herd of reindeer might pass through 1 week, then vanish for months. Berries might be abundant in summer, but rot away by the first frost. And hunger forced you into dangerous choices. Maybe you scavenge from a predator's kill, knowing it could return at any moment. Maybe you eat plants you aren't entirely sure are safe. Maybe you follow a herd deep into territory you know belongs to another, more aggressive tribe. The irony was cruel. The more desperate you became for food, the more likely you were to take risks, and the more likely those risks would end your life. Hunger didn't just starve the body, it stalked the mind. And in the prehistoric world, it was always just one failed hunt away. When you live in a world built to kill you, your only option is to turn it into your weapon. Prehistoric humans weren't born with claws, fangs, or thick hides. But what they did have was a brain, and that brain learned to make killing tools out of anything it could touch. A sharp rock wasn't just a rock, it was a knife. A branch wasn't just a branch, it was a spear. Bones from a dead animal? Perfect for smashing, scraping, and cutting. But these weapons weren't made for sport. They were made for necessity, and desperation has a way of sharpening both stone and mind. The first spears were crude, hardened in fire to make their tips harder. Then came stone points lashed to shafts with sinew. A good spear could keep a predator at a distance, or bring down dinner before it escaped. Fire itself became a weapon. Flames could be used to drive animals toward traps or away from camp. Smoke could force dangerous creatures out of hiding. Even the smell of burning wood could keep predators from getting too close. Every tool was a silent promise. I will live another day and you will not. And in the hands of a desperate human, even the simplest weapon could change the balance between life and death. If you picture ancient humans stalking prey in the tall grass, patiently waiting for the perfect throw, you're only half right. Sometimes hunts were careful. But often they were brutal, chaotic, and merciless. Animals weren't just food, they were survival itself. And when you're starving, you don't care about fairness. Entire groups worked together to chase herds into cliffs, forcing dozens of animals to their deaths in one massive kill. It was efficient, yes, but also horrifying to watch. Other times, hunters set fire to the grass to flush out prey, knowing the flames would burn everything in their path. Some even dug deep, narrow pits lined with sharpened stakes, covering them with leaves and dirt. An unlucky animal would stumble in and be impaled before it even knew what happened. The goal was always the same: minimize risk to yourself, maximize the kill. A wounded hunter could doom the whole group, so the safest hunt was the one where the prey never had a chance to fight back. This wasn't cruelty for cruelty's sake. It was survival stripped of sentiment. In a world where death lurked in every shadow, mercy was a luxury no one could afford. The most unsettling truth about prehistoric weapons? They weren't just used on animals. When resources were scarce, when two groups wanted the same water source, the same hunting grounds, or the same shelter, those weapons turned on other humans. Evidence from prehistoric skeletons tells a chilling story: fractured skulls, spear points lodged in ribs, deep cuts in bone. These weren't accidents. They were battles, ambushes, murders. Some were quick, desperate clashes over food. Others were more calculated: raids at night to steal supplies, burn shelters, or drive rival groups away for good. Violence wasn't constant, but when it came, it was swift and decisive. In the prehistoric mind, them was always a threat to us. And in a world where survival was a daily fight, eliminating a rival wasn't seen as immoral, it was seen as practical. The same tools that brought life through hunting could just as easily take it away in the name of protection or power. And this is the first glimpse into what truly horrifies about prehistoric survival. The line between defending your people and destroying others was paper thin, and often, it vanished entirely. Hunger in the prehistoric world wasn't an occasional inconvenience. It was a constant shadow, waiting for the moment when the hunt failed, the foraging trip came up empty, or winter locked the land in ice. When that happened, people didn't just get hungry, they faced starvation. And starvation changes everything about what you're willing to eat. Roots that were normally too bitter or poisonous, boiled until barely safe. Insects, ants, termites, beetles, became protein-packed snacks. Worms, plucked from under rocks, were eaten raw when there wasn't time to cook. Bones left over from a kill, cracked open with rocks to suck out the marrow. Even hides and leather scraps could be boiled into a gelatin-like soup to squeeze out the last calories. Sometimes it went even further. Archaeological evidence shows cut marks on human bones that match butchery techniques. A grim sign that in the most desperate times, prehistoric humans ate their own dead. It's not that they wanted to. It's that the choice was between doing the unthinkable or not living to see tomorrow. In a world without modern hygiene, safe to eat was a loose term. Food was often dirty, crawling with bacteria, and already rotting by the time it was consumed. A half-eaten carcass found in the snow might be days old, but that didn't matter. Meat was precious and fire could cook away the worst of the smell. Sometimes, people learned to stomach rancid fat, spoiled fish, and fermented blood. They scraped mold from dried meat and hoped the rest was edible. Water was no guarantee of safety either. Rivers carried animal waste and disease, but thirst was a more immediate danger. Early humans drank straight from muddy pools or melted snow, trading the risk of sickness tomorrow for the certainty of death today if they didn't drink. Parasites were a part of life. Gutworms, lice, and fleas weren't problems, so much as background noise. In prehistoric survival, if something didn't kill you instantly, you counted it as a win. When food finally came, whether it was a successful hunt or a lucky find, the reaction was primal. There was no saving for later. No neat portions. The group would descend on the kill, tearing into meat with hands and teeth, eating until they could barely move. Organs were prized, liver, heart, kidneys, eaten quickly before they spoiled. The stomach of a herbivore, full of partially digested plants, could be consumed for extra nutrients. Bones were cracked immediately for marrow. Fat was eaten in thick, greasy chunks because it was the most valuable calorie source in the Ice Age. Even the head of an animal might be roasted whole so nothing went to waste. It was messy, bloody, and without ceremony, but it was the difference between life and death. And as quickly as the feast came, it was gone. The next day, hunger would return and the cycle would start all over again. Imagine sitting by a small fire at night, the only warmth in a world of cold wind and black sky. Your group huddles together trying to rest. Then, somewhere beyond the flicker of the flames, two eyes appear. For prehistoric humans, this wasn't imagination, it was reality. The night belonged to predators. Lions bigger than any alive today. Packs of hyenas with bone-crushing jaws. Saber-toothed cats, silent until the moment they pounced. Our ancestors' only warning might have been the sudden silence of the forest or the faint crack of a branch. By the time you saw the predator, it might already be too late. In Africa, crocodiles waited at riverbanks to snatch anyone who came too close to drink. In Europe, giant cave lions and bears ruled the land. In Asia, tigers and leopards hunted silently through the undergrowth. Humans weren't at the top of the food chain, we were somewhere in the middle. And every single day, every single night was a gamble. The most terrifying part? Even during hunts, the roles could switch instantly. A group might track a wounded deer, only to realize they had stumbled into the territory of a predator that had been stalking them. Lions, leopards, and wolves often shadowed human hunters, waiting for the perfect moment to strike. These predators didn't just kill for food, they learned to exploit human weaknesses. They attacked when weapons were down, when fires burned low, when the group was split apart. Some prehistoric kill sites suggest that entire human parties were wiped out by predators, their tools and bones left scattered. The evidence is clear. In many encounters we didn't win. Humans adapted by creating lookouts, keeping fires burning all night, and traveling in groups whenever possible. But even then, safety was never guaranteed. When it came to predators, the only real defense was aggression. You couldn't run forever. You had to make the predator think you were more trouble than you were worth. That meant spears jabbed toward charging lions, rocks hurled at bears, and fires swung like flaming clubs. The goal wasn't always to kill. Often it was just to convince the predator to leave. Sometimes it worked. Sometimes it didn't. In the worst cases, humans had to make a choice: save a wounded member and risk everyone, or leave them behind so the rest could escape. These decisions left deep scars, both physical and emotional, on early human communities. Over time, hunting weapons improved, and humans learned to trap or ambush predators in return. But in those early days, every encounter with a predator was a gamble with the highest stakes imaginable. In prehistoric life, you weren't just surviving nature, you were surviving the things that actively wanted to eat you. The prehistoric world wasn't a friendly place. Even without predators lurking in the shadows, the land itself could kill you. One wrong step could mean falling into a hidden crevasse in a glacier, the icy darkness swallowing you whole. In swampy areas, the ground could look solid but collapse under your weight, dragging you into suffocating mud. Volcanic regions were dotted with boiling hot springs that could burn through skin in seconds. Sudden rockslides crushed entire hunting parties. And in the open plains, lightning storms could strike with no warning, setting the grass ablaze and trapping anyone in its path. Early humans didn't have maps. They didn't have GPS. Every journey into new territory meant navigating dangers you couldn't always see until it was too late. Even something as simple as crossing a river could be lethal. Fast currents swept people away and cold water could sap strength until you drowned. The land was as much an enemy as it was a home. Not all dangers were obvious. Some crept in silently, giving no warning before it was too late. Plants that looked edible could contain deadly toxins. A few bites of the wrong berry could cause paralysis or heart failure. Water from certain pools carried invisible parasites that destroyed the body from the inside out. Then there was the weather. A sudden drop in temperature could freeze exposed skin in minutes. Early humans didn't have thermal jackets. They had animal hides and fire, and if you were too far from shelter, neither was enough. In hot climates, the opposite was true. Sunstroke could kill faster than hunger. Without shade or water, the human body overheats and shuts down. And diseases, though not fully understood, were constant. A small wound could turn septic, and without medicine that meant certain death. The most frightening part? Many of these killers gave no second chance. One mistake, one wrong guess, and your story ended there. Over thousands of years, humans developed ways to read the land and avoid its traps. They learned which plants to avoid by watching animals. If birds refused to touch a berry, it was probably dangerous. They mapped seasonal weather patterns in their minds, knowing when to travel and when to stay put. Shelters were built in safer spots, away from flood zones, under natural rock formations, or deep in caves that could withstand storms. Travelers carried embers wrapped in moss to ensure they could start a fire even in the rain. Rivers were crossed at known fords, and people learned to test ice carefully before stepping onto it. In swamps, they used long sticks to probe the ground ahead. But even with this growing knowledge, the prehistoric world never stopped being deadly. All you could do was stay alert, adapt, and hope the land didn't decide your time was up. In the most desperate moments, the enemy wasn't a predator, the cold, or even disease. It was other humans. When food ran out and survival meant life or death, our ancestors sometimes made choices that would horrify us today. Archaeological evidence from sites across Europe, Asia, and the Americas shows human bones with cut marks. The kind made by stone tools, the kind left behind after flesh was stripped away. Cannibalism wasn't constant, but when famine struck, it became a last resort. For prehistoric humans, the choice wasn't between morality and immorality, it was between starvation and one more chance to live. Some scientists argue that in certain cases, consuming the dead may have been a way of keeping their strength within the group. Others believe it was simply about survival, nothing more. Either way, it's a reminder that under enough pressure, humanity's most ancient instincts can overwhelm any sense of ethics. Resources were scarce and humans competed fiercely. When a rival group found water, shelter, or hunting grounds, it wasn't always shared. Sometimes it was taken by force. Evidence from ancient skeletons shows skull fractures, spear wounds, and arrow points embedded in bone. These weren't accidents. They were signs of brutal, intentional violence. In some regions, groups of early humans raided others, taking food, tools, and sometimes even members of the group as captives. For smaller or weaker bands, a single attack could mean extinction. The weapons were simple but deadly, sharpened spears, heavy clubs, and later bows. There were no rules of engagement, no treaties, no mercy. It was survival at its most primal. If another group stood between you and the resources you needed, they were a threat to be eliminated. The most dangerous threat sometimes came from inside your own camp. Jealousy, rivalry, and disputes over leadership could tear a group apart. If someone felt they were being denied food or status, they might challenge the leader, or try to take control by force. In small groups, even a single act of betrayal could be catastrophic. If a hunter refused to share a kill, or if someone abandoned their post as a lookout, lives could be lost. Trust was everything. Without it, the group couldn't function, and in the prehistoric world, being alone was almost certain death. Survival demanded unity, but unity was fragile. When it broke, it often broke violently. And so, the story of prehistoric survival isn't just one of humans against the world. It's one of humans against predators, humans against nature, and sometimes, tragically, humans against each other.